Would you rather get 1,000 likes or 10 qualified sales conversations?
And how will you know which one matters more when AI search is cutting into your website traffic?
We talk with CEOs regularly who are putting time and money and energy into their marketing. But when we ask how it's performing, a lot of times it's just kind of a blank look, or we might hear things about how many page views they have or how many likes they get. Maybe it's impressions.
Which all that's great if you're running a popularity contest. But if you're trying to grow your business and close deals, those metrics won't really tell you what you need to know.
Now, those metrics have their place, but with things like the rise of AI search engines, such as ChatGPT and Perplexity, a lot of times people aren't even visiting websites the way they used to. They're getting answers straight from AI. And that means your website traffic is probably already dropped, even if you have good content.
And that's a huge shift, which is why understanding what to track and what not to track is more important than ever.
So today we are pulling back the curtain on marketing data, what's worth tracking, what's just noise, and how to know whether or not your marketing is actually moving the needle for your business.
This is one of those episodes that'll save you a lot of time and a lot of money.
And a lot of frustration.
Welcome back to Growth Minded Marketing. I'm Annie Laurie Walters.
And I'm Steve Phipps.
This is the show for growth minded CEOs and their teams who want to lead with clarity and scale with confidence. We simplify marketing and equip you with frameworks and strategies to grow your company and your team with purpose.
And today we're talking about something that shows up in just about every marketing meeting, campaign report, and pitch decks. And that is metrics.
Metrics aren't all created equal, are they?
No, they are not. So let's talk about what are vanity metrics. And in short, those are the numbers that a lot of times can make you feel good. And that a lot of times marketing agencies and marketers like to point out, but they don't actually tell you whether or not your marketing's working.
What are some common examples?
So before I give these examples, again, let me qualify here. These metrics have their places. But what we want to do is really rifle in on what are really your KPIs, your key performance indicators. You're CEO, you are busy. So what are the numbers that you need to know so that you understand whether or not your marketing is working? So some of the metrics that we would say are vanity metrics that when they're looked at just in and of themselves, don't really tell you anything, but they might sound good. It could be things such as your website traffic, how many visits you had last month, the number of likes and shares and followers on LinkedIn or Facebook, page views, impressions. And again, they can have their value, but not if they're in a vacuum.
Right, because these kind of metrics can just become high traffic numbers without any conversions to back them up. So yeah, you're right. You want to have a lot of website traffic. You want people sharing your posts. You want the follower count to be going up, but you really need to have some sort of dotted line from those metrics to conversion. Because otherwise, how do you know that all that activity and all that effort and all that manpower that you're putting behind your marketing is actually growing your business or not? You need to have that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. As a CEO, you want to know what's your ROI because otherwise these numbers make it look like things are good and busy, but it's not building a pipeline. And so that's the key difference, knowing the results versus just seeing busy activity.
Steve, what's a quick test the CEO could use to know if a metric is actually helping them grow their business or just making their marketing team look busy?
Does it help you make better decisions about how you're going to invest your dollars so that you can get more business? That would be something that you would want to look at because ultimately, if you can't draw it back to either revenue generated, ultimately that's it. Can you draw that back to some sort of revenue generated so that you can then correlate it back to the investment you're making in the marketing? Because if it's not netting an ROI, you might be getting results that's costing you money and costing
Yeah,
you
that's
profit.
a good test. And a lot of people right now are using AI tools to create a lot of content really fast. And the internet is now flooded with 20x the amount of blog posts that weren't there a year or 2 years ago. And we were talking about how just flooding your website with blog posts without a strategy is kind of a waste of time. And I think that even just saying, oh, well, our team publishes 50 blog posts a month can become a vanity metric if you're just posting content to check a box.
Exactly. Because we've seen situations before where people were creating content that the search engines liked. It was getting clicks, they were getting traffic, people were spending time reading the articles, but it wasn't aligned with their audience. It wasn't aligned with their strategy. So, yes, website traffic was really high, but when we started digging in, it wasn't generating any leads. And so that's where having that connection, great, you have website traffic. How many leads is that actually generating? How many of those leads are then converting into opportunities and ultimately into customers? So, another question to consider here is instead of vanity metrics, which again have their place, as a CEO, what should you track instead? How do you know what matters? Ultimately, it means you're tracking data that's connected to actual outcomes, leads generated, appointments scheduled, looking at what your conversion rates are. How many of your leads that come in through ads are converting into appointments and then ultimately customers? You're looking at how many qualified leads, if you're using MQLs and SQLs, how many are being generated? And again, ultimately, how many deals are being closed?
Right. You want to know if your marketing is attracting the right people and moving them forward in the buyer's journey.
Here's a good way to think about it. What actions do I want people to take? And am I measuring whether or not they take them? So, for instance, we want people to schedule a demo or we want people to schedule a free consultation. Great. One, is your website clear? That's what you want them to do. And then are you measuring whether or not they are?
And we talk a lot about the transitional offer too. That's another really great metric to measure. If, the person's not ready to schedule a call, if you've got that helpful resource that they can download in exchange for the email address, like those are the kind of numbers you want to track.
Exactly.
Because if you're not tracking the right data, then you can't really optimize what you're doing. And ultimately, you're just kind of guessing.
And so when you can see the metrics, when you can see what's working and what's not, that is what then allows you to make those adjustments. Maybe it's changing the color of the button. Maybe it's changing the words on the page at the top of the page. Again, you move things around. The metrics are what tell you your conversion rate. That's going to tell you whether or not it's achieving the goal. And those are the kinds of things that can help you generate a positive ROI. But if you're not measuring it, you're not going to see that. I would say too that it ties back to our guide framework where the E stands for evaluate and adjust. And you can't adjust what you're not measuring. You can't evaluate it just based on gut feel.
If you're new to our podcast and this is your first episode, we talk a lot about our guide marketing framework. It's the foundation for how we help CEOs and their teams build clear strategic marketing plans that actually support business growth. Steve, tell us more about what GUIDE stands for.
So G stands for generate your story and strategy. U is for upgrade your online presence. I is inform with content. D is develop and execute your sales plan. And E is evaluate and adjust.
And we have an entire podcast series on the guide marketing framework. We will link in the show notes that you can go back and listen to. But ultimately, it's a roadmap to ensure your marketing is aligned with your sales goals and your customer journey. Everything we're talking about today connects to that last letter in guide, E, evaluate and adjust. Because good strategy means nothing if you're not measuring the right things and making informed decisions.
So, why does this all matter for you as a CEO or the owner of your business? If you're leading a company, most likely your job isn't primarily to be a data analyst, but You absolutely do need to know key information and how to ask the right questions so that you can connect marketing performance to business results.
And here's the mindset shift. We're not anti data, we're pro alignment because the right data gives you clarity.
And especially now, with more people using AI to get answers instead of searching Google, your content might be working behind the scenes in AI models, but it's not driving traffic to your site.
That's such a good point. CEOs need to shift from obsessing over traffic to understanding impact. Is your content influencing decisions, even if people never actually hit your homepage?
That's part of the evolution of what we're seeing. We've talked a lot about vanity metrics, but also it's important to know what metrics to look at that as a CEO, there are metrics that you don't necessarily need to look at, but somebody on your marketing team needs to understand what they're telling you. So let me just give you a quick example here. So if you're looking at your numbers in Google Search Console, if you're not familiar with Google Search Console, it's a portal that Google gives you to show you how your website and how your content is showing up in search. It'll show you the number of impressions that all of your content received over the course of whatever time frame you choose. It shows you the number of clicks. It shows you the click through rate, and it shows you the average position for all your content. Now, if you were to look at your search console over the last 6 months, most likely what you would see, and because which a lot of our clients, this is what they're seeing, impressions have gone up. So the number of times that their content shows up has increased. But in some cases, the number of clicks has decreased. Why is that? Well, it's AI. It's what we've been talking about. Content is still showing up, but people aren't clicking through to your website. Now, if you don't understand how the metrics work and you don't understand the full context, or somebody on your team does not, then you don't understand how to respond to that. Now, a good case in point, we have one of our clients that they have seen similar kinds of numbers, but where they have seen an increase is in their branded content. So people are searching them by name more often. And so in that particular case, the strategy is to create more content around their company name and about what it's like to work with them, what the process is, et cetera, because people are then searching for them by name, which gets into more of a middle of the funnel type search. Now, I know it's a little bit of a rabbit trail there, but that's where having an understanding of how these numbers work together can help someone on your team make strategic decisions because ultimately that's going to drive traffic to your site in some form or fashion. And you need to understand what's converting into leads and what's not.
I'm really glad you mentioned Search Console because it brings up the good point of which tools are the best tools to be tracking the right metrics. So, what would you recommend? You mentioned Google Search Console. Are there other tools that people should be using to track the metrics that are going to be tied to meaningful results?
So, one of the tools that I like, and again, you may have tools that you like that are telling you good information. Fantastic. And there are going to be any number of recommendations out there. I like HubSpot because it can serve as a single record of truth where you can see not only how people are getting into your website, what they're doing on your website, but then you can follow them through to conversion and ultimately into revenue. Now, that is dependent on people populating information and having that set up correctly. You're not going to get that information by default. There's intention, not only in terms of how it's set up, but also in how it's being used. That being said, other tools, Google Analytics, Google Search Console, some sort of an SEO tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs. Those are tools that will give you good detailed information because sometimes the metrics that you need to get into are very specific to a channel or a particular strategy.
And that's where using UTM codes can be really helpful. I know that's highly technical. And we'll drop a link in the show notes to a blog post we have that really impacts what that means and how to do that well. But basically, there's some codes you can add at the end of links that you put on social media or that you put in your newsletter or wherever you're going to put a link. And you can set it up in GA4 to track, when they click the link to come to your website, that code tells GA4 where they were when they clicked. So then you can see, oh, I'm getting a lot of traffic from LinkedIn, but my newsletter is not getting as much traffic, and the case, maybe you have a podcast and you want to drop links in your show notes. Oh, are these coming from my podcast show notes? Are they coming from my YouTube show notes? All that kind of stuff. That's what UTM codes show you. And it's just a best practice and a little extra step. What I'm seeing, and I'm not sure, I feel like this is sort of an emerging thing, but I'm seeing that links directly out of Chat GPT, it's like Chat GPT is automatically putting UTM codes on the end of those links. And so you could see that traffic in GA4 coming out of Chat GPT because it will automatically collect it and show it to you as well. Some things you have to set up for the codes that you create yourself, but these ones that are coming straight out of Chat GPT, just give it a try next time you're in ChatGPT and you click a link. You'll see when it takes you to the website, there's already a UTM code there. And that's not because the people on the other end added it. It's because ChatGPT wants you to know it came from them. So I think that's really interesting.
And, a note that I want to make here when we talk about vanity metrics, a lot of times the context is numbers that marketers like to use to try to paint a picture that things are going really well and that what they're doing is valuable. What we are advocating for is metrics that help you make better decisions. For the CEO, that means you have a handful of KPIs that you can look at that lets you understand where marketing as a whole is going, to let you know that things are working the way they should be, or that if they're not, that somebody is making adjustments tactically to get things back online. As Annie Laurie was just talking about, tactically speaking, metrics are absolutely critical because it's looking and getting into the weeds of the metrics and understanding what they mean so that things that are further out, if you will, tactically are ultimately going to drive the leads that are going to convert into opportunities and then ultimately into customers. And so, Annie Laura, you gave the example of the newsletters. If you've got a newsletter list, you need to understand, are people clicking? If yes, what was the article? What was the content? What was the subject line? What was the offer? And not only did they click, did they convert? And so it's seeing the data that can tell you the story of what your customers and buyers and prospects are doing at each step of the journey on whatever channel or channels they're coming through. And so as a CEO, you may not want to get into the minutia of that, but obviously you want people in your team who understand those numbers and how they ultimately roll up into that handful of KPIs. So again, it's just the numbers need to be purposeful, not just tossed out there for the sake of seeing a number that looks impressive. And along with that, we haven't talked about paid ads a whole lot, but that is absolutely a very viable channel and approach for the right companies. We have a handful of our clients who are running paid ads, and we help manage that process for them. And the guide framework doesn't get into really much detail about that at this stage, but it definitely fits into the inform with content and upgrade your online presence because you want people to be able to find you when they're searching, or you want to be able to reach them at the appropriate time with messages that help them understand how you can solve their problems. But here again, it's tracking more than just impressions. It's getting it down to what's your ROI.
Steve, I want to throw this out there as well. We work with CEOs who have small marketing teams and we offer marketing coaching services. I know you've worked with companies and coached their marketing person. These are companies that might just have one person who's trying to wear a lot of hats or one or two people. I would say your marketing person, if you just had a one person shop, they want to do a great job. They want to do good work for you. And I think that's why it's really important because they may be sitting there thinking, you know, they probably know, oh, these are vanity metrics, but my boss wants to see them, you know? So I don't know. Speak to that. Like, how would you coach the person who needs to try to help their CEO, their manager understand, like, you know, a ton of Facebook likes are great, but this is more valuable. You know, how can they kind of lead up from within in that way?
So I think it comes back to making sure that your marketing manager, your marketing director, whoever's doing your marketing, whoever owns that seat, that they understand the journey your customer takes. What are the steps in that process from the very first point of contact all the way through becoming a customer? And then you begin to look at the different channels that they can come through. So if they come through social media, what are the steps? If they come through search, if they come through an ad, and then looking at what are the different things that can be measured along the way. That could be clicks, that could be, maybe there's likes and then there's clicks and then there's time on the page and then did they convert as a lead? And there are other metrics that are mixed in there. But making sure they understand what those numbers mean throughout that journey, and then ultimately being able to correlate that back to the end result of revenue generated. And so there's just a lot of times there's educating that needs to happen there that may not. And so when they can have that education, when they can have that and they understand that, then they can become more effective at measuring and knowing what to do based on the numbers.
So if you're not sure whether or not you're tracking the right marketing metrics, or if you're spending money without knowing what it's producing, here's what you can do next.
Head on over to wayfindmarketing.com and take our free guide marketing assessment. This includes questions around your goals, KPIs, lead gen, sales alignment, and it helps you see where you're strong and where you're guessing.
Or if you're ready to talk with someone right now about your marketing strategy or any of the things that we've discussed today, we'd love to chat. Send us an email at podcast@wayfindmarketing.com.
Now, this episode is brought to you by Wayfind Marketing. If all the marketing metrics that we've been talking about have your head spinning or you're tired of chasing clicks that don't lead to sales, schedule a discovery call with us at wayfindmarketing.com. We will help you figure out what to track, what to ignore, and how to create a plan that aligns your marketing and your sales with your business goals.
Vanity metrics may look nice, but they won't grow your business. Let's start measuring what matters.
As I said previously, start with the end in mind. Track what drives revenue, not just recognition.
And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. And share this podcast with a CEO who you know is looking to grow their company.
We will see you next time on the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast.